And the reason I was fired is the owner of the store discovered that I had entrepreneurial tendencies, right? And that I really didn't want to be there. Even though I was a really good salesperson, my heart wasn't there. And so I had to make a decision at that point. Was I going to make my dream a reality, or was I going to get a normal job?
Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
You've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
Well, I started out as you read, as a professional magician, and was, after I discovered sales and marketing, was successful. I went from doing 3 shows a month to 25 shows a month in less than 90 days. And then I did 57 shows in my 4th month. And what happened was I started getting invited to speak on different stages for entrepreneurs, just to tell my story, because it's kind of a unique, different story. But the truth is, my business was like no other, like everybody else's service business, professional services, right? I had to generate leads. I had to close sales over the phone. I had to deliver the service. Mine just happened to be show business, but it was the same exact stuff. And people understood that. I mean, intelligent audience members understood that, right? And so they started asking me just to consult with them on their business, because if they sold a professional service, it was really the same thing. And so I started doing that. And then I started getting invited to speak on stages where they wanted me to sell something from the stage. And the first time I did it, I bombed. And I couldn't believe I bombed, because, man, I'm like, oh, I'm a performer. I'm on stages all of the time, right? And it was funny because I had the audiences laughing and clapping and all of that stuff, but no one was going to the back of the room to buy the thing I was selling at the end. And so I made the classic mistake of thinking if I just delivered a presentation and tacked on a close at the end, that I'd be successful. So I basically took the same path that I took to become successful as a magician. I bought a lot of different people's courses, went to training events, studied with really great pitchmen, and developed my own system. The next time, so that was about over a 2-year period, I was invited to go back at that same event, because it was an annual event that I bombed at. And this time I wasn't on main stage, right? They put me in a breakout session first thing in the morning. But I had my new system that I had tested over a couple of years and that I developed, and I sold $330,000 worth of stuff
In one show?
In a 75-minute breakout session. Yeah, 75 minutes. And so I ended up being the top seller at the entire event, which then led to people saying, can you teach me how to sell one-to-many? And so really that's what we focus on now, is teaching people how to sell one-to-many, whether it's on a virtual stage or an in-person stage. Most of my clients are professional services folks. So for example, financial advisors, attorneys, chiropractors, those types of folks who want to generate leads. And so we teach them how to do webinars to generate leads, but the webinar also then converts them into appointments, and then they close. And then we've got a second piece of the business, which is, okay, now you've got the appointment. How do you close the sale, right? But our main focus really is on one-to-many selling. And that led me to starting the website Sales Espresso, which is really how we generate leads for our business.
Okay. So, and I just went ahead and just went right into this. So, before we go any further, Dave, can you tell the audience your name and your quick background, like where you're from, maybe, a little bit about your growing up.
Oh, growing up. All right. So, hey, Dave
Like
Dee
a little bit
here.
more about what makes you well, one, being crazy enough to be an entrepreneur, but the second, then to do it in the magician field. That takes some conviction. So what creates that kind of conviction in what you're going to do?
Yeah. So it's such a great question. So I'm originally from Springfield, Massachusetts, and I grew up in a household where my friends called my parents Ward and June Cleaver. I don't know, maybe that shows you how old I am. But I used
We
to
still
love
watch Beaver
watching.
in the House.
Right. I mean, come on, man. Now, just so everybody knows, that was actually recorded before my time, but I enjoyed it as a kid. And so my parents came from a very traditional background. And I remember when I was 8 years old, my grandmother gave me a little magic set, as most kids get, or most boys get at some point. And I absolutely fell in love with it. I mean, I wasn't an athletic kid, but this was something I was really good, and I loved it. And I knew right about when I was 8, 9 years old that this is what I wanted to do for a living. Like, it wasn't a passing thing; it was a
Right.
deep conviction. And it was interesting. My parents thought it was kind of cute when I was 8, 9, 10. They didn't think it was so cute, Ken, when I was 18, right? Right.
I bet the girls loved it.
Yeah, and so I started getting, not really. So I started getting a lot of, um, I guess I would call it negative input, or that's what I would say back then, but they just didn't know, right? My dad
Right.
worked a traditional job, and he thought success was working for one company, working for them forever, and getting the gold watch at the end. But I really had this passion. And I took a very traditional route, though. I did not pursue it. I went to the University of Massachusetts. I graduated with a degree in communication. I got a job in radio, then eventually radio advertising sales. And I was probably the worst radio advertising salesperson on the planet, which is funny now because, right, we've got a daily newsletter called Sales Espresso where I teach selling. But then what happened was I was reading in a trade magazine for entertainers, for magicians, about this job in Atlanta, Georgia, which was for a demonstrator at a executive magic store. And so the company was called Magic Masters, and they had stores throughout the country, but not for magicians. So they were in really nice hotels. So, for example, the Marriott Marquis and the Hilton here in Atlanta. And what we basically did was sell overpriced magic tricks to unsuspecting conventionaires, right? And so I applied for that job. I got it, and I moved out of my hometown of Springfield. This was about, 30 something years ago, to Atlanta. And I started working in this magic shop. And it was really there where I started to learn how to sell. Because what we had to do is we had to draw people into the store, right? Draw people as they were walking by into the store. We would then do a scripted demonstration of a scripted little magic show, and then we would sell the tricks afterwards. And I got really good at it. I was a really good pitchman. I actually became the top salesperson in the company, and they made me sales manager, which basically meant that I was when someone couldn't come in for their shift, I had to do a double shift. That's what basically sales manager meant. Really exciting. And I don't want to make you jealous here, Ken, and your listeners jealous, but when my best year, I made $23,000, my man. 23,000. Yeah.
As a sales manager.
As the sales manager, my best year. And I remember driving home in my car, my beat up car, with the windows rolled down after doing a double shift in Atlanta in the summer. Now, you might be asking why my windows were rolled down, because the air conditioning was broken in my car, and I couldn't afford to fix it. I mean, I literally couldn't afford to fix it. And man, I lost it because I'm just dead stuck in Atlanta traffic, and I lost it right then and there. And I knew something had to change. And I had this passion ever since I was 9 years old, 8 years old. And something did change. Very soon thereafter, I was fired from that job. And the reason I was fired is the owner of the store discovered that I had entrepreneurial tendencies, right? And that I really didn't want to be there. Even though I was a really good salesperson, my heart wasn't there. And so I had to make a decision at that point. Was I going to make my dream a reality, or was I going to get a normal job? And man, I just remember my dad coming home from work every day and being unhappy. Now, I have the greatest parents on the planet. I really do. And my dad provided for the family, but he never had a passion for what he was doing. And I said, I never want that to be me. I never want that to be me. And so I decided to eventually go for my dream. Problem was I was only doing 3 shows a month. And then I went to a seminar. I saw a speaker, and I bought a product I didn't think I could afford on marketing. And that really changed everything. So that's the backstory.
Wow. So your current company is helping people sell starts
Yeah.
from you learning how to do it yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Starts. And I think that's it's rare. I mean, there's so many, I always tell people I'm not a guru. I'm not a sales guru. I'm an entrepreneur. So I own multiple businesses.
Right.
So Sales Espresso is one of them, but I'm also an owner in an insurance marketing organization. So I'm not a financial advisor. I'm the marketing guy and the sales guy. For that company. And so, yeah. And so I've developed a skill specifically for selling one-to-many, and how to use that to generate leads and then convert those leads into clients.
Wonderful. And you primarily do that one-to-many from the stage.
From the stage, either virtual or in person. So it was a really interesting thing. So the way that I made all of my money before COVID was I'd go and I'd speak on different stages, and I would often walk. I remember saying just a little bit earlier, I said my best year I made $23,000. Well, I make a lot more like in one presentation, like a lot more in one presentation. If I'm not walking away with $50,000 to $100,000 from a presentation, I'm not a happy camper, right? And so, and that all went away though with COVID. And so my way of generating leads, which was speaking and selling my products and services on stages literally all over the world, went away in an instant. And so I had to make an adjustment. And so I made the adjustment to webinars. And the truth is, if you know how to construct a presentation that inspires an audience and motivates an audience to take action. By the way, notice I didn't say gives you applause. I said motivates them to take action. And there's a huge, huge difference between those two. And by the way, selling from the stage or selling on a webinar is way more difficult than getting a standing ovation and applause. I can teach almost anybody to get a standing ovation, and I can teach anybody to sell, but they're not the same things. And so I had to make that adjustment. And so we adjusted to webinars for our own business. And then my clients who were coming to me to learn how to create presentations to sell from the stage had the same issue that I was having. And so now we're teaching really people how to use webinars in a very unique way to, again, generate leads and then turn those leads into clients.
And I've got a ton of questions for you, but is selling from the stage in person, is that dead now, or is that going to be coming back?
I think it's coming back a little bit, but here is what most of my clients have found is that they get more people to show up for a virtual presentation at a lower cost per lead. Now, the truth is, in most cases, though, your closing percentage will be higher in person, right? When the audience member is sitting there right in front of you, then it will be on a webinar. However, some of those things balance out. So, for example, the financial advisor doesn't have to buy the steak dinner, right? Like they were doing, or rent a room, or any of that stuff. They can literally do it from the comfort of their home, and they're generating more leads. And this is a really, really important point that people miss as far as lead generation goes. So a webinar is a wonderful way to generate leads, right? So you drive people to a webinar registration page. And by the way, let me give everybody a huge tip. You want to be doing live webinars. Don't listen to anyone that's telling you to automate this stuff. You should be doing live webinars, just like you would do a live in-person presentation. Your conversion rate is higher. Your show-up rate is higher. Your opt-in rate is higher. Everything is better than when they get to choose a time and all that kind of stuff. I've tested this a million different ways, and live beats the pants off of a recorded event. And so what the beauty of the webinars, again, it's lower cost per lead, typically higher show up rate. And so although your closing percentage might be a little bit smaller, the benefit of it's really powerful. Now I've got a lot of people that are doing both, right? Because there's some people that simply are not going to get in a car and go to the Outback to watch a presentation, right? So I think you should be doing both if you can, but you should absolutely be doing webinars for sure. 100%. Everyone should be doing those. And it doesn't matter what the business is. If you've got something that you can demonstrate, so I'm working with a surgeon, right? And he's actually going to show part of his unique procedure in the webinar. So you can do a lot of demonstrations of it. Doesn't matter what you are. Let's say you own a furniture store, right? Well, you can do a webinar showing people how the best way to set up their house, right? And where the furniture should be placed. Now I'm just making up stuff because I know nothing about the furniture business, but I think people get the idea. So it's not just for someone that's selling, for example, an information product, or someone who is a professional services provider. Every professional services provider or consultant should be doing webinars, 100%. If not, it's like a marketing sin,
right?
Because they're leaving out their best tool out of their toolbox.
At least some kind of video production, like moving to demonstrate their product or service.
Absolutely.
I agree with. Now, believe it or not, I have a lot of coaches and mentors in my life that I lean on as a regular basis. I know I look super polished right out of the box, but one of my current coaches, and I'm not going to tell you who it is adamant on doing webinars, and not only doing that, but doing live webinars. And this is a conflict, I think, between coaches right now. And this particular one says, never record them and never re-release them. What is your take on that?
So whoever this person is, probably one of my students. Honestly, I totally agree with that for the most part. So here is the problem. If you were going to do webinars on a regular basis, okay, which you should be, right? So just so everybody, I do at least one a week, okay? But let's say you're just going to do one a month. The problem is you will eventually train your audience not to show up. Okay. So if you're doing a replay, the person says, well, they're just going to do a replay. I don't have to show up. I'll watch it later. And the problem is very few people, even though they have the intention of going to watch it later, will actually go watch it. And it's much more powerful to say in your copy for the webinar, whether it's email copy or Facebook, whatever, or on the registration page, there will be no replay. You'll get a higher percentage of people who show up, right? So you're training people not to show up. Now, if you're just going to do an occasional one-off webinar and you're not going to do them on a consistent basis, then you might want to consider doing a replay. I would still never tell people that I'm going to do a replay. Right. So on occasion, let's say I do a webinar and it just crushes it. It kills it. Right. I may do a replay, right? But even better than a replay, though, would be to do an encore presentation. Like just say, hey, I'm going to do it again the next day, right? So I for the most part, I agree with that. I don't do a lot of replays. And you're going to have some people that are upset. But the way to think about it is, if you were to do a live seminar, if they don't show up for the seminar,
they don't show up.
They don't watch it. If you buy a ticket to a concert and you don't show up for the concert, you miss the concert, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I agree with that.
I think that's good advice. I don't know long term. I think one, you should always record it. You might not re-release it, but you might have some great content in there you can release clips of at minimum. So when people are putting together webinars, and we'll go through your feelings on that bashed first selling from the stage event, it's nerve-wracking. You spend a whole lot of time and energy, and you're going to put together a marketing campaign. You're going to ask people to show up to this webinar. On your first webinar, how many people should you expect to show up? Or what would be a good number to show up? Like, is there a percentage of the people you email, or how do you come back into that number?
Yeah, let me give you back it up just a little bit so we can give like some really great value here for people, because I'm going to give them one of my biggest secrets on the planet for getting a high show up rate on your webinar. Remember now, there are two groups of people, right? So the easiest group of people are people who are already on your email list, who are unconverted leads. All right. So it's a great way to build a list, by the way, a webinar. But if you already have unconverted leads, the biggest no-brainer in the history of marketing is to send out an email invitation sequence to people who are already on your list, right? I mean, it's even if you think they're dead leads, send them the invitation sequence. In that scenario, here's a gigantic tip. You want to send your entire, now, so typically, by the way, let me give a whole bunch of great advice here. So to your own list, you do not want to promote the webinar more than 1 week out. So what I see a lot of people doing is they start promoting a webinar 3 weeks out or a month out or 2 weeks out. It's too long. What will happen is you'll get people to sign up. They're not going to show up. They're going to, like, it's just not. I do my webinars on a Thursday and I start promoting them on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And so my campaign, again, this is to my unconverted leads. So on Monday, they get an email which explains what the webinar is going to be about. There's bullet points. It really goes into detail about what the webinar is going to be about. And then there's a couple links in it to drive people to the registration page. Here's the big secret. On Tuesday, what you're going to do is you're just going to write a different opening to that same email. And you're going to send it to everybody on your list, even people who registered for your webinar. The only wording change that you need, because the opening is going to be different. Okay, the bullet points about the webinar are all going to be the same. In fact, basically, I write a different opening, then I write, P.S. Here's the original email for your convenience, and I just paste the original email. The key wording is, if you haven't reserved your spot yet, go here. So for the person that has already reserved their spot for the webinar, they don't say, oh, why did he send me this email? Right? They just read the email. Right. What it does is, if you write these emails properly and you send the entire sequence to the list, even people who have registered, it acts as a reminder, and each email gets more and more exciting leading up to the webinar. And so what it does is it confirms the person who registered, hey, I made a really great decision. I can't wait for this thing to happen. For the person that hasn't registered, it gets them to register. And so what most people do when they do a webinar, and everyone teaches this, you take them off of the invitation list and you put them on a reminder list. Well, you still do the reminder emails for sure. Okay, you still do those, but you send the entire sequence to everyone on your list. That'll dramatically improve your show up rate. So I'm getting anywhere between a 40 to a 60% show up rate on my webinars, which is and again, one of the big secrets is you got to have a really good topic, right? And we can discuss that if you want. There's so much to discuss. But the other technical secret is to do exactly what I just said. Okay. And so from a cold list, like if you're getting leads from Facebook and you're following a really good follow-up sequence after someone registers, by the way, the follow-up sequence is not just, hey, don't remember, it's coming up in 1 day. Remember, it's coming up in 24, 2 hours. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a structured sequence, which gets them more and more excited about the webinar, where you get to let them know you. So I'll just tell you what it is. You want to have at least 2 videos before the webinar that have content in them, and also introduce you to them and reminds them about the webinar. So that should be part of your follow-up sequence. And if you do that, even with a cold list, you should be getting about 30 to 40% of people who sign up to show up.
Wow. Does your service help the user write that email sequence?
So we have different levels, right? So we've got courses which teach you how to do it and give you the exact same templates that I use. Right. So when a client pays me, most people can't afford my fees. So when I do have private clients, but I use my same templates. right?
Right.
So when I'm going to create an email, I'll tell you a funny, embarrassing story in just a second. So if I'm going to create an email sequence, I take out my own templates. So in my course on how to do this, you get the templates that I use, right? And I show you how to fill in the blanks. So the other day I did a webinar for myself. And because I use the same templates that I use for my clients if somebody pays me to do it for them. And so I had just did a campaign which killed for a guy who owns a business where he teaches people who have music schools how to grow their schools, right? Guy by the name of Marty Ford. He's brilliant. And so I wrote a campaign and for him using my templates. Well, I did a campaign for my own, something I did last week for myself. And I didn't look, I used one of his emails. So like the subject line says, how to get more students quickly. Right. And I don't sell it. Right. So the whole email is how to get more students, because again, I'm just using my own templates. Right. So there's different levels of things that we have, from literally do it yourself with a course to, well, do it in a small group with me to, okay, we'll do the entire thing for you.
Right. Okay. I want to go back to that first event that you did from the stage. Right. And
where I bombed.
I'm a firm believer.
You want to bring me back there, man? Where I bombed?
That most people don't do stuff for fear of failure. And the failure is all kinds of different stuff when you really start studying this, right? It's fear of failure because they don't want to get to the stage. Sometimes it's even, I'm afraid to sell it because I don't want to service it after the fact, right? The fear comes
You're 100%
somewhere across that board.
Yeah.
Now, you went and you invested time, invested money, put yourself out there in a way that gives most people chills, right? You're going to stand in front of a group of people that you've asked to be there.
About 800 people.
And talk. And it wasn't successful in your mind because you didn't turn around the money that you wanted to turn around from that event. But there's something to be said about having 800 people and having the experience of doing that. But when you didn't have the money at the end of that, why did you do another one?
Yes, it's a really great question. And you put it nicely that it wasn't successful. Dude, it was a disaster. So the way that this works is, just to give people a little inside baseball. When you see a speaker selling from the stage, what typically happens is the promoter gets half of those sales, right? So the speaker is not being paid to go and speak. So I typically will make as much, if not more, when I speak than the paid celebrity speaker. Right. So a paid celebrity speaker will get anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 to go and just do a talk. Well, I'm not a celebrity, right? So no one is going to pay me $50,000 to $100,000 to go and do a talk, right? I've got to sell. And so the promoter gets half of that typically. All right. So I let my mentor down, because it was my mentor who put me on the stage in the first place, let him down. And then I really thought I was going to make all of this money because I saw other speakers doing it. And I was really down, like really down. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to stick to being a performer. And that's it. I was doing well at it. I enjoyed it. But then there was two thoughts that came to mind. Number one, I could make a much greater impact on people's lives by teaching them something, as opposed to just being an entertainer. So what I do now, by the way, when I go and speak at events, in fact, I just booked one for Vegas, I do my show the night before I go and do my presentation. All right. So I'm still get to do my show, but it's just not the primary thing anymore, because I still love performing. So that was the first reason. And the second reason was not as altruistic. I saw the potential because I saw other speakers walking away with $50,000, $75,000 from 75 minutes worth of work. And I thought to myself, wow, that will be amazing if I can learn how to do that. And so I'm very competitive. And so that was part of it. And I really wanted to learn how to do this. And I wanted to become one of the best in the world at doing this. And then I was just doing it for myself. And then, like I said, people said, well, can you teach me how to do it? It was the exact same thing as when I was generating those leads and doing marketing for my magic business. And people were saying, hey, can you help me with my business? Now they were saying, they really came to me and said, can you teach me how to do this? Because they were in the audience and they saw people getting up literally out of their chairs and running to the back of the room with their credit cards. Like, I'm not exaggerating, by the way, literally running to the back of the room.
Right.
So yeah, that's how I got into this, but it was for those reasons.
That's it for today's show, folks. If you'd like to join my text line community, the number is 314-370-2871. All you have to do to join that text line is send me any question about business or technology. I'll do all the research, and I'll give you an absolutely free, totally unbiased answer. Get to work.